new reports that there is a tape, that Donald Trump is on it, and that Michael Cohen made it. Now, why is this news breaking right now as this legal pressure builds across the board on Trump's lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen? And the White House has continued to battle back a scandal of Putin proportions that's engulfed it all week. Well, I can tell you, I'm very excited to learn some of the answers because we have several key people and reporters on the show tonight who can shed light on this question. Now, here is what you need to know. The New York Times is reporting Michael Cohen taped Donald Trump 2 months before the 2016 election, and they discussed secret payments potentially to be made to former Playboy model Karen McDougal, who has said that she had a relationship with Trump in 2006. She has since prevailed in a suit with a media outlet related to all those allegations. We'll get to that. What else do you need to know? Well, investigators have this tape, the FBI seizing it from Cohen's office in April. After that raid, Cohen's opponent in the Stormy Daniels case, a man you may know, Michael Avenatti, made some news on this show by declaring he knew for a fact this type of tape existed.
I know for a fact that Donald Trump is on at least one of these recordings, Ari. I'm not going to get into
How do you know that?
I'm not going to get into the details of how I know that, Ari.
But would you say that in court?
Absolutely. Donald Trump is on one of the recordings, at least one of them. I know that for a fact. I stand behind it.
Stands behind it, and today that fact being reported. Michael Avenatti joins me live tonight with more. Now, the White House is making clear it doesn't like this news at all, and that it was caught off guard. A source saying Trump didn't know he was being recorded, while his lawyers are probing what other potential tapes could reveal. They're also trying to put word out tonight that any other recordings that may exist are, quote, not substantive. This story has moved fast, so it is worth keeping the context in mind. These leaks make Cohen look like something of a threat to Donald Trump, as Michael Cohen relies on his own lawyers to defend himself and a top Hillary Clinton aide. But it was just 3 months ago, only 3 months ago, in this lightning warp speed era we're living in, that President Trump was telling reporters on Air Force One Cohen was still his attorney, meaning on his side, and that Cohen could take all the tough questions on Trump's behalf.
You have to ask Michael. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
I always liked Michael Cohen. I haven't spoken to Michael in a long time.
A long time. In a moment, I'm going to speak to former federal prosecutor John Flannery about the legalities of all of this, as well as another lawyer for Donald Trump, his longtime litigator, Jay Goldberg, who's joined me before. So we have a lot to get to, including, as I mentioned, Avenatti. But I begin with Megan Twohey, an investigative reporter for the New York Times, who has covered this case extensively, and Liz Plank, a senior producer for Vox, who has also given us reporting and analysis on many of these cases, which involve allegations by women who say they've had contact with Donald Trump. Megan, when you look at the original allegation against Trump and Cohen, how did these women get us to this place? And why is Michael Cohen looking more and more like he may be taking out revenge on the president?
Well, this has been, I think that this has turned into a legal rat's nest for the president. What we know about what happened in 2016 toward the end of the presidential race was, well, two things. One, that there were payments made to women who claimed consensual affairs with the president. One was made directly by Michael Cohen. That's the Stormy Daniels payment. Another was made through American Media, Inc., the parent company to the National Enquirer. And, you know, at the time, Trump has been insistent in the beginning, saying that he didn't know anything about these payments. Michael Cohen has said that he handled them on his own. And I think what we've seen today is more new evidence that would suggest that the president was actually certainly aware much closer to the time of the payments, if not at the actual time of the payment, at least in the case of American Media.
Which means what?
Well, these payments are significant because they're being investigated as potential campaign finance violations.
And it would seem to imply that he was lying about it before.
That is one way to read it. And so the question is, yeah, not just if he's been lying about it, but in fact, was he a direct participant in these payments? Was he aware of them at the time? And if so, that could basically plunge him into the heart of this criminal, one aspect of this criminal investigation.
Yeah, and Liz, let me read a little more from this reporting in your publication. Giuliani saying now today Trump had told Cohen if he were to make a payment related to Ms. McDougal to write a check rather than send cash so it could be properly documented. New York Times also also, jumping ahead to what a lot of people want to know, if there is a case, and they used to say, if there is a bear, well, if there is a case, quote, it's not clear whether a federal judge would rule on whether prosecutors can even listen to the recording, and we'll get later to the lawyers here, but whether or not prosecutors get it, it's in the New York Times for a reason tonight. Do you think it's because Michael Cohen is continuing to try to give the president a hard time?
Right. I mean, maybe when Michael Cohen told Donald Trump that he wouldn't record his conversations, maybe he meant that he would.
Wow, I think that's a double negative burn.
Right, but if there's one person that would understand that, it would be Donald Trump, right? Understand that kind of mistake. So clearly, you know, Michael Cohen has used different ways of communicating with Donald Trump in a very sort of subtweet kind of way where we're all aware of it and we see it happen out in the public sphere, whether it's with, you know, tweets that he's done or meetings that he's had with, you know, Vice, with a show literally called Trump Tapes, I believe, and sort of inching at the idea that there are these tapes. Today, it's very clear that, you know, we don't know who leaked this story, we don't know who leaked this information, but given the reporting, I think it's pretty clear that it might be coming from Michael Cohen himself. And so he's trying to speak to Trump. He's trying to, you know, always the idea of the pardon and him wanting this pardon is always in the backdrop and clear, I think, with the story.
Well, I think the point Liz makes wouldn't not be a bad theory, by which I mean, I'm sorry, double negative, I botched it. I just meant it's a
really
good theory.
Hard to do.
Well, it's interesting, too, that Giuliani, in defending the Trump on this tape, has said that he wasn't aware that he was being recorded at the time. And that raises a couple questions, which is, one, was Michael Cohen in the habit of secretly recording the president in the process of representing him? And two, why did he feel compelled to secretly record him about this matter?
Let me bring in John Flannery on some of these questions. Mr. Flannery, when you look at everything you've just heard, what is the legal significance?
Well, in terms of the law, the campaign violations are an obvious one. But in terms of the strength of the evidence to show that, I thought the Times story just before the quote that you had was significant because it shows knowledge of both men, Cohen and Trump, of what AMI is doing with Playmate McDougal. He says, should we buy her story directly, or should we buy it from AMI? And and then the question is, should we pay in a check or we should do it by cash? And he's encouraging Cohen. Trump is encouraging Cohen to do it by check, which strikes me as bizarre. And you have to wonder if this was also a pattern to reimburse AMI for what they'd already done.
Right, so let's slow down a little bit because we're getting into the initials. You're talking about the National Enquirer parent company, and you're talking about whether there was an illicit plot to misuse or abuse that organization, that media company, to secretly try to buy people off and bury their story. And that's a big no-no, to use a legal term. We spoke to McDougal's lawyer about this. Take a listen to what he was saying, because we've been reporting this out for some time. A lot of different reporters have been working different angles of the story on what does look very shady. Take a listen.
Sure.
Was the National Enquirer acting as the arm of Donald Trump and Michael Cohen? And if so, is there something wrong with that?
We strongly suspect they were. That's why
we brought it.
Well, if the lawsuit had continued, we would have been able to prove it.
John?
Yes. Well, here's the thing about the abuse. I think what we have is we have a long-standing relationship, which has been well reported, between AMI, Mr. Pecker, and Mr. Trump, in which they have helped each other from time to time, and both favoring Mr. Trump and killing other stories. What they did with the McDougal story was they paid her $150,000 and they killed the story and tried to tie her down with that contract. That's certainly an abuse of a situation in which presumably they said this is a story that's going to run. You don't pay $150,000 for a dog, and then they didn't run it. And the only person who profits from that is candidate Trump. And so these conversations, and they did that in August, so these conversations in September, only a month later, seem to fit naturally with an ongoing scheme. You know, should we now pay her directly? Should we buy the rights to the story from AMI or the Enquirer? And that shows a continuing knowledge of what's going on. And all the denials by Trump are after that.
And Megan, speak to the point that if Michael Cohen may have had some inkling that he had exposure on this. If he kept the tape secret from Donald Trump, he wasn't making the tape for Donald Trump. Was he making that tape at that time because he thought he had the presence of mind that there might be something shady that would backfire on him? Megan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are certain things that we don't know, but that certainly raises the question of what was the motivation to secretly tape the president on that issue at that time. I mean, this is the thing about tapes, right? Tapes don't lie. I mean, you can have disputes about a conversation you had back in 2016 with a he said, she said, he said, he said, but tapes don't lie, and so I think it's very significant that's a huge significance of this tape.
Right. Well, Liz, as you know, Pusha T says the scale doesn't lie, the tapes don't lie either, and this is why Michael Cohen may have made it. I want to bring in Jay Goldberg, who was Donald Trump's exclusive chief litigator from 1992 until 2012 and has been his advisor as well, and has told me they retain attorney-client privilege. Jay, I always appreciate you making time to come on the beat. This is a big night. Do you think these leaks are in the New York Times because of Michael Cohen? And did you ever secretly record Donald Trump without his knowledge as a lawyer, or is that something that only Michael Cohen did?
I don't think that's unique to Michael Cohen. It's not unique to a wrongdoer who's in a relationship with somebody who might be viewed as a co-conspirator.
You said, did you call him a launderer, or what word? Sorry, what word did you use? Not unique to a what?
To a co-conspirator. If somebody is doing something wrongful, then they might be concerned about their own position, and they'll tape record it to see if it can be used later on to win the cooperation of the government.
Do you think, you're saying something so powerful, Jay, I want to make sure we're hearing you right. Are you saying that you think Michael Cohen viewed himself as having exposure as a co-conspirator at that time?
Yes, absolutely. Now, I might point out that when I represented Donald actively, he referred David Pecker to me. So the relationship between the Inquirer and Trump is extremely close. But make no mistake, Michael Cohen was concerned about his own position. He wanted to stay in the good graces of Trump because Trump essentially was his only client, but he had the presence of mind to know that he was treading on shaky ground, and he had to have something that he could sell to a prosecutor should the matter explode.
Do you think David Pecker, who oversees this media empire, do you think he has any potential exposure for doing things that really weren't under his obligations and fiduciary duties to that company, but rather were some other sort of scheme or plot?
I think he has a fiduciary duty to the shareholders, and he, too, has exposure. But I'm concerned about Michael Cohen. If you spend 5 minutes with Michael Cohen, you know that he's not strong. He's weak. It's odd to say this, but when he said that he would stand up for the president, I knew from talking with him for less than 5 minutes that he was sufficiently weak that he would cave in with respect to any wrongdoing.
What do you mean by weak, though? Do you mean that he would tell the truth about his history, or you mean that he would be intimidated by prosecutors?
He couldn't be counted on to protect the person who was paying him. Very few people who face the prospect of jail stand up. In fact, it's difficult for me to recall any instance over decades of practice where somebody has stood up and taken it on the chin.
But let me press you for a moment, Jay. I understand the point you're raising, but if the facts that he provides to the federal investigators are not negative or incriminating to Donald Trump, then it doesn't matter whether he's weak or strong, right?
Well, the prosecutor makes a judgment as to whether the person is telling the truth negatively or positively. The idea is to win the affection, if you will, of the prosecutor. And if the prosecutor feels that you're telling the truth, albeit not measuring up to criminal activity on the part of the target, you still have the cooperation of the prosecutor.
Let me bring in another former federal prosecutor, a colleague of sorts of yours. John Flannery, your reaction.
Well, my reaction is that you're being a little gentle about what's going on here. It's very suspicious since Cohen shared this tape with Trump when they were going through the tapes. And since it's not clear that the government has a green light to disclose it, and I don't think they would, there are only two real possibilities of disclosing this tape. One is Cohen and the other is Trump. And Lanny Davis is a skilled, skilled publicist, shall we say. And it feels like Lanny may have, hypothetically, been responsible for the Cohen tape being revealed to show that Cohen has something worthwhile. And Rudy Giuliani perhaps should have remained silent, because basically it is an inculpatory document. It does not exculpate Trump. And so I would say score one if Lanny did this for him, and another blemish on Giuliani's jump to explain how exculpatory this document is and how the timing doesn't matter when it is very close to the payoff in August that they're in September talking about maybe how they handle the money, reimbursement, buying the story themselves.
I'm out of time, Jay, but I'll give you the final word briefly. Go ahead.
Giuliani's not been helpful to Trump. He gives a long exculpatory statement, so he thinks, but then he says that Michael Cohen can be counted on to tell the truth. And that's an exact quote from the statement that he makes. And it's in Trump's interest to impute a negative hostility to his testimony with respect to any wrongdoing on the part of Trump. And for Trump's lawyer to say that he's somebody who could be counted on to tell the truth is not in Trump's interest. And yet, that's exactly what he said. And that'll come back to haunt Trump during the investigation and prosecution of any claims.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.